Hi there, everyone. This is Beth Turner here with The Huddle, and today I'm with Eugene Katchalov, entrepreneur and global poker champion. Eugene, thank you for being here today.
Good to be here, Beth. Thanks for having
So my first
me.
question for you, could you start by telling me a little bit about your history with poker? How did you first start playing, and what are some key moments in your career that got you to where you are today?
So I started playing in 2003. This was right around the time that the poker boom was starting out. And I was just about to graduate college. I went to NYU in New York. Um, and a couple of friends invited me to come play a game of poker, and I just wanted to see what the fuss is all about. We went to play. I By the end of the game, I still didn't really know what the didn't even fully know what the rules were, but I knew I really liked the game, and that kind of got me started. And then we started playing on a weekly basis, and shortly thereafter, I found out that there's something called online poker, and I started playing there. And shortly thereafter, I realized, oh, I could actually make a little bit extra money on the side. I was still living with my mom, but I was able to make a little bit extra money on the side, and that was certainly really nice. Um, and then fast forward probably about a year and a half or 2 years was when when I made my first big trip to Vegas, to California, to play in actual casinos, and I had a really successful trip. I remember, to Vegas in 2004. So that kind of kicked things off, and gave me a proper gave me a bankroll of maybe like $30,000-$40,000 at the time, and then allowed me to play more and more and more. And then in 2007 was when I had my real breakout year, when I had my first real big win, when I won $2.5 million. And that really gave me the freedom to kind of travel the world, play poker everywhere, and so on. And then I think that the second biggest thing that really kind of changed my life, I guess, is when I joined PokerStars as an ambassador in 2011. I was with them for 5 years, and that also taught me to kind of to adjust to a lot of things, because now I was much more recognizable. People that I didn't know recognized me a lot. I became like a minor celebrity, but just in the poker world.
Mhm.
So that's something I had to adjust to. But that also, what I'm really grateful to that for is that it also provided for a lot of very interesting friendships, not just behind the poker table, but through the poker table. It allowed me to make, the network that I was able to build with people outside of poker was what really kind of something that I'm really grateful for. Very, very, successful and interesting people from all different walks of life.
Fabulous. You do
So
mention,
what was the second part of your questions? I don't know if I answered it.
and just sort of the key moments that you felt got you to your position. What do you feel like were the key moments that got you to where you are?
Yeah, I would say the key moments, like I said, was the big win in
Mhm.
2007, and joining PokerStars in 2011 were like the biggest transformational ones.
Fantastic. You
All
mentioned
right.
PokerStars there, and I've got a question for you later on that. We'll go back to that one in a minute. But something you
All
also
right.
mentioned there is technology and how online poker really changed the game for you. How has, aside from that, how has the industry changed since you began playing? And how has that impacted maybe the typical idea of what a poker player is?
So the game has changed a lot since I first started playing. When I was starting out, there was no there was no kind of really good educational tools for poker. People were just kind of playing by feel, talking with friends, and looking at what others are doing and just doing their best to see what works. And the interesting thing about that period was that there there were a lot of colorful players, even like on a high level, like very colorful in the sense of it was like fun to watch them on TV. Like they were just like really interesting characters. Whereas today, I think the poker world has evolved to being much more game theory oriented, like much more mathematical. Um, People use technology in larger ways, things like solvers and AI, to help them come up with solutions to different poker questions that they may have. And So what that's caused is that it kind of shifted to who kind of used to be a pro to who is now a pro to to being people who are keen to study much more. Um, and I would say the biggest issue with that is that like on one hand that is good, that is kind of good for poker in a sense that it made the game much deeper and much more interesting for those who are already in poker. But the problem with it that I think is that I think it made it less interesting to watch for people who don't already know poker. So people who may be new to the game or who may be thinking about learning poker, it may seem like kind of complex and potentially off-putting when you're seeing that there's so many things you have to account for. So what I think has happened is that I think there's also less of these like kind of really colorful characters that I mentioned that they used to be in the past. So I think for a lot of people who are not already familiar with poker, it may be more fun for them to watch things like just like normal sports or even just like casino games on on a stream. Um, so I think in that sense, it's like on one hand, poker has grown as an evolved, just like any other sport or any other competitive thing, a competitive game. But on the other hand, I think it's become somewhat less inviting to new players, and I think that's a problem. And that's actually what I'm attempting to address with my upcoming new company that I'll be announcing soon. I think this is a place where poker, like the way I put it is the percent chance of the top tier player beating recreational players has widened so much, like it's become so big that a recreational player will have less fun playing poker because they'll just lose much quicker than perhaps they used to. So basically, they will get more bang for their buck at in a casino game or just like betting on sports or something. And I think this is where you really kind of have to bring it back at least somewhat the way it used to be, so that professionals can still make money, but not so much so that it drives away recreational players.
It's become more technical, which is almost a blessing and a curse depending on how and why you're playing.
Yeah, exactly. It's both those things, exactly. So it's like for professional poker players, it's great because you have all these new tools and people who take poker seriously, it's great. But I have this fear that but the thing is, like, if there are no recreational poker players, then there's no money for professional poker players to make. So it's like it's like the chicken and egg. Like you need recreational players for the community, for the poker community to thrive. So so you need to find ways to attract them and to have to bring to basically make it entertaining for them to play poker.
Absolutely. Now, you kind of mentioned your own company there that you're going to be introducing soon, but are there any other companies that are operating in the poker vertical at the moment that you find particularly interesting or you feel are driving the market forward?
Yeah, I think the number one company lately has probably become GGPoker. It's quite massive, and I think they're doing a lot of very interesting things that didn't exist, maybe 10 years ago. And which I think are really cool. I'll give some examples. Things like very kind of interactive emoji when you're playing at the table. These are just like little things. They don't really impact the game, but they make it perhaps more fun to express emotions at the poker table, which I think is something that typically you don't have online, but you do have in offline poker. So I think that that's a minor thing, but I think it's actually really important because I think that's something recreational players look forward to, right? Like to express emotions. Another thing is they introduced this ability for players to actually buy and sell their own action in tournaments and in games. I think that's really cool. So basically now, if I have a favorite player, I can actually buy a piece of them, in some tournament if they're selling. So I think that's also kind of revolutionary and engages recreational players more. And just in general, I think they took the approach of rebalancing like table stakes and rake in ways that they think will be, more beneficial for the recreational player. I'll put it that way. It may not be to what professional players like, because obviously professional players are trying to earn as much as possible, but at the end of the day, they're trying to provide for the poker ecosystem. So I think in that sense, that it's definitely very interesting to observe what they're doing.
Fantastic. So we'll go back to what you mentioned earlier. You were a brand ambassador for PokerStars and apparently also a brand ambassador for Poker Match as well. Can you tell me a little bit about those experiences?
Sure. Yeah, those are really, I'm definitely very, very proud of those experiences. I was with PokerStars from 2011 to 2016, and with Poker Match, I believe it was from 2018 to 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So Poker Match was a local operator in Ukraine. It was the largest online poker operator in Ukraine, and so that's kind of, it was like a natural transition for me to be with them, especially since I was living in Ukraine at the time. So those experiences, as I kind of mentioned before, they were really good for me in terms of getting used to being a more public person. In terms of they were also kind of gave me the ability to do things that I would have never otherwise gotten to. Some examples are like being part of like reality shows, or traveling to places I otherwise would not have. As I said, meeting people that I otherwise would not have. Being part of poker game shows that I otherwise would not have. Like I'll give you one like prime example. I was the official poker coach of my friend Andrei Shevchenko, who was the most famous football player from Ukraine. At the time, PokerStars created this like little documentary series where they had like 6 sports stars competing in poker, and it was Andrei Shevchenko, it was like Rafael Nadal, it was Ronaldo, it was like all these like super high tier sports stars. And I was fortunate enough to be already friends with Andre, and I coached him, and I got to meet all the other players at the game. So that's just like one example of something I otherwise would not have gotten if it was not for being an ambassador. So I'll leave it at that.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Can't really complain about that.
Yeah.
So we've kind of already mentioned technology, and that technology has made people more technical in the way that they play poker, but has it affected how people play in any other ways? And do you think it's improved people's play?
Yes. So I kind of touched upon this before, but definitely technology it's basically, the way I would describe it is, if in the past, as I said, there were no actual learning tools, nothing. Whereas today, if you were keen to really learn poker, you can probably do so in a couple of months. And there's a load of different tools. There's training sites. There's coaches you can hire, and there's software you can purchase, and you can essentially get to a pretty high level fairly quickly, at least to like a medium level. And that's something that took maybe years in the past, and that's something that can take just a few months today. So in that sense, it's definitely had a huge impact, and part of the reason why, like I said, like poker for a lot of people is just a game to have fun. It's just another game for entertainment. So for them, it may not, it may seem like too difficult if that's what they think will get them to play like at a normal level. It may just seem too difficult. Whereas for someone obviously who's looking to play poker professionally or is deeply interested in the game, obviously those are really, really good developments.
For sure. Now, talking about professional poker, recently at the World Series of Poker main event, there was a player that brought a laptop with him and was assessing his hands on the laptop after they'd been played. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly, he didn't do anything illegal. It was legal at the time. It just so, but I think it won't be next year. I think they'll definitely learn from that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it legally, but I think there is something wrong with it, again, from the perspective of poker trying to be inviting towards recreational players. I mean, that is like the most watched event in poker, by far, the final table of the main event. And it is probably watched by a lot of people who are completely new to the game or who may be considering learning, and that's where kind of my fear is. Again, like, how will these people look at poker? Is it going to make them scared? Like, oh my god, am I going to be playing versus people who are using these, like, very strange looking charts and like software, and I'll have no chance. I might as well just go play like roulette or blackjack or something, or slots or whatever. Just because it may seem too difficult. So that's kind of where my fear is. I think we need to. I think the poker world needs to show a much more inviting side to potentially new players, while at the same time, obviously allowing professional players to continue learning and exceeding in their skills. But to kind of to clarify that those things are not necessary for you to just like learn the game and have fun with it.
Now, off the back of that, the World Series of Poker recently had a merger with Caesars. What do you feel about that? What do you think that could mean for the series and the poker vertical as a whole?
Yeah, so they merged with GGPoker actually. I think. So I think that's actually really, again, like a really good development for the game. And I'll give a prime example of why I think so. Basically, when I was starting, even in 2006, I remember the main event was won by a guy named Jamie Gold, and at the time, it was the largest main event in history. It was like poker was like really at the peak of its boom, and there were, I don't remember exactly, but there were maybe like 12,000 players or something in the main event, which is a $10,000 buy-in, so it was huge. But the main reason why it was growing so fast, like the main event, was not just because there were more people actually coming in with $10,000 in cash to buy in, but because there were many satellites running basically smaller tournaments that allow you to win an entry into this event, and these satellites were running online. At the time, this was run through Party Poker, through PokerStars, and the world, because this was kind of like legal as far as I understand in the US, they were able to send all the like thousands of players who just won these online satellites to play in the main event directly. And then in 2007, when the industry took a drastic turn, Party Poker left the market. PokerStars couldn't be quite so active in the US. So they couldn't send online players anymore to the World Series, and you saw a huge drop in the main event entrance from that year. Now it's been rising slowly, since then, but only recently has it even come close to those numbers. So basically, coming back to this acquisition of the World Series of Poker by GGPoker, I think this is So I think we'll see much higher numbers in all World Series of Poker tournaments, simply because GGPoker will be able to run satellites into all these events through their online platform, and just bring many new players into these games. So I think you'll see much higher offline numbers for all these events, and also you'll just see I think many new innovative ways that GGPoker will be able to expand the World Series of Poker brand. They have the cash, they have the resources to do things that the World Series of Poker did not on their own. So I'm kind of excited about it, but we'll see what actual changes it'll bring.
Speaking on business, what do you think a business could learn from a poker player? Do you feel that poker players and people in high-level executive roles need to have certain qualities that they share in order to be successful?
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of crossover. I remember even a lot of the business people, the really successful business people that I've met, have told me actually that there is a lot of crossover, and that's one of the reasons they really like poker. It's just they kind of see poker as like an accelerated version of business in some sense. Like, whereas business takes kind of years to play out, a poker tournament or a poker game is kind of quick, but it involves a lot of the same kinds of aspects. Things like risk management, things like psychology, the way you network or deal with people or with your opponents, basically how you deal with potential losses. being able to adapt your strategies based on the situation as it develops. It's like all these things are exact. They're kind of just they're very important to poker, and that I'm sure business people will recognize them as being very important as business as well. So I think for business management, the overall thing I would say is like it's important to realize that like simply being on cruise control is not gonna get you to success. Like you need to be constantly on top of your game, both in poker and in business.
There's definitely transferable skills between the two. So
those are all I would say. Like,
so if you could give one piece of advice to a gambling executive based on your experiences in poker, what would it be and why?
I think I would say the number one advice that I can give, like that I found the most important is, and that's really like the most important thing in poker, is knowing your opponent and being able to adjust to them. So now in business, you'll have opponents as well, right? You'll have competing companies, but you'll also have customers. So, and I think knowing your customer or knowing your opponent, like both those things are really, really important. In poker, you learn things like, my job as a poker professional is to, try to figure out my opponents as quickly as possible to try to see how do they approach this situation, how are they thinking, what is their logic like, because then I have to use that information in my in my own interest, in later hands, in later situations. And I think it's exactly the same thing in the business world. The faster you can understand your opponents and your customers, the better decisions you'll be able to make, the better adjustments you'll be able to make.
Fantastic. So we're going to slightly change course a little bit now. We briefly mentioned earlier, you spoke about AI, and AI is everywhere. It's the talking point in every vertical. But in your opinion, do you think AI could make online poker experiences more realistic? And do you think that could potentially impact the land-based sector of poker?
So the AI is, it's certainly how should I put it? Like accelerating the path towards kind of like game theory optimal poker that we've kind of touched upon before. So I think it will have impact there, and I kind of worry, in some sense, what that means for online poker, in the sense that there are so many tools now that will help you play, that will actually give you like really correct decisions. And while all these platforms are combating like bots and all these solvers so that they're not actually used in real time while you're playing, it's still very difficult, right? So it's like you still kind of never know if someone is actually cheating you in online poker, and I think that's an image that that's kind of where online poker struggles today. So I think AI makes that kind of more difficult. So in a sense, this is where this is kind of where I see a positive for offline poker, because offline poker doesn't have that to the same degree. It's easier to see when someone's kind of cheating, or using or using some sort of technology to make decisions. So in a sense, I see. I'm very optimistic on the growth of offline poker in the future. For online poker, as it is today, I'm not particularly optimistic, but I am optimistic in other ways that I kind of mentioned before. If sites are able to find a way to either effectively battle the bots, the cheaters, and all these AIs, or change the game so that those same systems have a more difficult way of extracting money from the players, then I think you may see again then I'd also be optimistic on those things in online poker. So that's kind of how I'd put it.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. As technology gets better on one side, it gets better on the other, and it's just a case really of keeping up with what technology is doing, especially
exactly
is trying to make sure that no one's cheating.
Exactly. Yeah.
So beyond AI, are there any new advancements kind of coming into the poker market at the moment that you feel could have a significant impact on the market going forward?
So again, I've kind of touched upon this a little bit already, but I'd say anything I'm optimistic on anything that levels the playing field between professional poker players and recreational poker players, just kind of levels it a little bit, and battles all that, all the AI that's helping them. I'd be optimistic on those things, and you already kind of see, you've already kind of seen, some of that in online poker, where kind of very quick turbo-ish games that have more gamble to them, they've been very, very popular. I think some aspects in that direction are kind of needed. Basically, I think the overall goal here is to make poker entertaining again for recreational players. So whatever achieves that, that's what I'm optimistic on. And I think the widening gap between recreational players and poker players, as that gap widens more and more, that it makes it less entertaining for recreational players. So that's where I'm pessimistic on. But whoever is able to bring that gap closer, I think we'll see good numbers and good growth.
Fantastic. So I've got one more question for you, Eugene, just to kind of round out today, and I really do appreciate it. And you've said you feel like there is this big gap happening between the professionals and the recreational players. But in about 3 years' time, what do you think the market will look like? Do you think that's something that in 3 years will be able to be tackled?
In 3 years' time, well, as I've said, I think I'm very optimistic on offline poker. I believe that we'll continue to see record-breaking numbers in many of the events, and I think you'll see new series coming up. I'm like I said, I'm excited to see what GGPoker does with the World Series of Poker brand. And yeah, I don't know what else new I can say about online. I kind of touched upon this in the previous question. I think I am skeptical about the way online poker is today. I think it needs something transformational, something different, in order to effectively battle all the bots and the cheaters. Just because there's simply too much incentive for bad actors to to go after weaker players, and that's bad for the market, because the weaker players will lose their money quicker, they'll go to other games quicker, and then the ecosystem dries up for money. So I think it's important to fight that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, it's making sure the poker market isn't a snake that eats its own tail sort of thing.
Precisely, yeah. That's actually a really good way of putting it. Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Well, that's all I've got time for today, Eugene, but thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And to everyone watching at home, thank you for watching.